We get the sound turned up. You can see the subtitles there. If you'll notice the campaign contribution at the bottom for $4,700, and then the $250 million fraud scheme associated with said individuals. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, it's not me calling out one community or another, one individual, representative or another. It's fraud. Representative Robbins, Hudson, and Rarick, thanks for your service. I know it's difficult, and you're operating in difficult circumstances where it doesn't sound like you got a lot of support. And I imagine that as Ms. Robbins, Representative Robbins, you're the chair of the Oversight Policy Committee. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I imagine at the state level, you don't quite have the resources you need to track down all this stuff. This federal jury found that Feeding Our Future mastermind and co-defendant, and also the contributor to one of your representatives from your state, one of our colleagues here, $4,700 for a $250 million pandemic fraud scheme. Like, you don't probably have the resources to find that kind of stuff. It's massive, right? And I suspect, as someone who, you know, you serve at the pleasure of your constituents who want to see you elected and contribute to you, a $4,700 campaign contribution for a $250 million of, I guess, spending at the federal level is a pretty good investment for people. We're not here to pick on anybody, but I will tell you, I think the American people are particularly affronted when their goodwill is returned by stealing their hard-earned money. I just want to, if you can comment on that particular case, this Feeding Our Future, and the fact that these folks pled guilty to $250 million, and then connections to the political operation in your state, which is dismantling your state.
Thank you, sir. Yes, so this is the big problem. There's a network of people who have been politically supporting the Democrats, who have also been contributing to them, and who have been involved in multiple schemes. So a woman who is in this child care group, the Minnesota Minority Child Care Association, Ikram Muhammad, she was later indicted in the Feeding Our Future scandal, as was her brother and her mother, and I believe a sister. And so it's a network that functions in our state that we have to get a handle on. And then one of the people indicted in that case for Feeding Our Future for money laundering $1.1 million, then they used that same company, shell company they did the money laundering with, to buy property for an assisted living facility after they were indicted. And then his wife has a company getting millions of dollars from the state to provide services to the assisted living facility bought by his shell company he's already been indicted for. They do not shut off the spigot. So that's the problem.
This is completely outrageous, obviously. I'm not an attorney. Are any one of you three attorneys? Are you? So, yes, sir. You said, Representative Robbins, that you informed the governor of these things. That's what you said, right? That's your testimony here today.
Yes, sir. I did a hearing on it, and I brought charts and laid out the roadmap.
So there are crimes of commission and crimes of omission. So if the governor didn't actively be involved in this fraud, that would be a crime of commission. But if he knew about it and didn't do anything about it, would you consider that a crime of omission?
Yes, sir.
And what should be done about crimes of omission regarding taxpayer funds?
So they should be prosecuted. And as you said, we don't have a lot of resources on our committee. As legislators, we don't have access to bank records, health records, the state payment system. So when we get credible allegations of fraud, we bring it to the U.S. Attorney and the Office of Legislative Auditor, because they can get access to those records and then bring the prosecutions criminally.
Thank you, Chair. I yield.
Mr. Chairman.
Before I go to Ms. Randall, Chair recognizes Mr. Biggs for UC.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Number one, Washington Post calls for welfare reform after Minnesota fraud scandal. Exclusive. Treasury and House panel launch probes into Tim Walz's handling of $1 billion of food aid fraud. Additionally, referring to the earmark that Mr. Perry just referred to. Additionally, the Somali fraud scandal gave Trump a kill switch. What happens if he doesn't use it? Resurfaced video shows how Somali scammers use daycare centers to scam the state. Scrutinizing SNAP will help ensure the neediest get food stamps. Masterclass, A.G. Hamilton School's WAPO hack playing race card to defend Somali fraud ring in Minnesota. Tim Walz was brought down by a scandal hiding in plain sight. Unearthed surveillance video shows parents allegedly helping with fraud. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back without objection, so ordered. Gentleman yields back. Ms. Randall, a couple of our witnesses have requested bathroom breaks. I told them, the ranking member and I agreed, they can go and come back. We're going to keep the hearing going. If your questions were pertaining to one of them, we'll skip to someone else. If that, do you want to go ahead? All right, Chair recognizes you for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I have prepared some remarks that I definitely want to get to about the importance of childcare funding for all of us in all of our districts. I think we all recognize that we are in a childcare crisis. We have lost so many parents, especially women, from the workforce because they just cannot find adequate childcare. But I have to start by addressing some of what we have heard in this committee so far today. I didn't get myself together to ask any of my colleagues to yield to for a question, so I'll ask you, and if you don't know the answer, it's okay, I do. What % of sexual assaults in the United States are committed by white men?
I do not know.
57%. Of the January 6th insurrectionists who were pardoned, do you know how many have been charged and convicted and arrested of additional crimes, including child sexual assault, kidnapping, production of child pornography, rape, conspiracy to murder an FBI agent, domestic violence by strangulation?
I do not have that information.
No, 33 since their pardons. Of the 21,504 murder offenders in the United States in 2023, do you know how many were white?
No.
8,842, which is 41%. Following the domestic extremist tracker that GEW compiles, since 2015, there have been 643 individuals charged, 447% found guilty. Do you know how many are men?
You tell me.
95%. We can trot out all of the data that we want to create the sense that there is a bad guy. There is a bad group of people. There are folks who are not among us. There are folks who are other. And I think we should spend a lot more time looking at ourselves, looking at American citizens, looking at white men who are committing violence at disproportionate rates in our country, who are committing crimes at disproportionate rates in our country, including the President of the United States, who is sitting at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, as so many of my colleagues have pointed out. I also want to say, you know, I've heard a lot about the Somali donors to political campaigns. We all acknowledge, right, that you cannot donate to a political campaign in the United States unless you are an American citizen, right? I'm just going to, like, acknowledge that. You know who else is getting rich as a campaign donor? The expense of the U.S. taxpayers and because of the decisions that this government has made. Yes, Elon Musk, but also billionaire Paul Singer, a Trump donor who is getting rich off the military actions that this president engaged in Venezuela. Now about childcare. $7 for every $1 spent on childcare and early learning are returned to our U.S. economy. It's good for families, it's good for kids, it's good for our economic growth. But we are still facing a childcare crisis in this country. Chair Robbins, I understand that you have 3 kids and that they were enrolled in daycare at one point before you became a stay-at-home mom. What would your reaction be to an unknown, potentially armed, angry individual showing up at your home with a camera, demanding to enter while your children were at home?
So we used a neighbor to do our childcare.
What if they showed up at your neighbor's house?
Yes, I don't think they would be coming in. But
Yeah,
honestly,
how would you feel about it if someone who was armed and angry showed up in the house where your children were?
I'm not sure I understand who was armed. What are you asking about?
Thank you. I imagine you'd be scared. I think many families would be scared if that happens to you. I want to share a story of a provider from Washington State who said, following these fraud claims and the demonization of Somali Americans and childcare providers, 3 adults came into her home and banged on her door, startling the children in her care. The children were frightened and confused. She's been receiving repeated death threats by phone and voicemail. Individuals have returned multiple times, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day, parking outside the home and monitoring activity. They recorded families arriving and leaving. As a result, families felt unsafe and some withdrew their children from care. A nearby provider closed their program entirely due to fear. Another provider shared that she was approached by a man with a gun outside her home who interrogated her about her childcare program, and she is now too scared to step outside. Providers aren't answering the phone anymore because of all the threats, which means that parents aren't able to get in touch with staff regarding their children's care.
Mr. Chairman, order.
Gentlelady's time's expired. You went 30 seconds over, as
Thank
did
you.
Ms.
Thank you
Stansbury.
for your lenience, Mr. Chair.
Chair recognizes Mr. Gosar from Arizona.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to the witnesses for traveling. Now, Ms. Robbins, the Minnesota legislature, led by your committee, sounded the alarm on the fraud for years, but it's been ignored by Governor Walz. Did Heath Ellison, the Attorney General, was he aware of this?
Yes, he was aware of the fraud, and he came before our committee, and I feel like he did not do his job prosecuting these cases. Most of the cases have been prosecuted federally by the U.S. Attorney, both under President Biden and Feeding Our Future, and currently under President Trump.
So he's, in your state, is the top attorney for the public, right?
Yes.
For the public. That's kind of not fun. I find it very interesting. Well, maybe it has to do something with campaign contributions. Attorney General Ellison and his son received from members of the leading Feeding Our Future, an organization now under investigation. The same group whose members allegedly tried to bribe jurors, but I'm sure that's just a coincidence. Nothing to see here. Sounds very familiar. Sounds very Biden crime syndicated-esque. Now, when you're talking about the tools that you could use, would any NGO that takes federal funding be of value to you, that they would have to disclose all their federal funding or all their funding mechanisms if they took 1 penny from the federal government?
Yes, one of the things we've seen in Minnesota is that some of these nonprofits have had their federal 501c3 status revoked, but the state continues to fund it.
It's interesting you say that because, you know, the IRS actually does this study, actually has those numbers, but when we order it, it's blanked out. It's redacted. All of it's redacted. I wonder if there's some interesting aspects to that, you know, follow the money trail. Now, Representative Hudson, the head of Feeding Our Futures was sentenced in November for his role in the largest COVID fraud scheme in U.S. history, according to the DOJ. This is a predictable result of the massive COVID spending with little or no oversight. In fact, we spent between $4.3 and $7.5 trillion during COVID, and we don't have a single receipt, not one, okay? Now, this is a predictable outcome from the massive spending. Whether it's expanded COVID tax credits under the so-called Affordable Care Act or the programs like the massive or Minnesota HHS initiative with a no enrollment cap. Unfortunately, there are plenty of similar federal programs right here in Washington, D.C. My question for you is, in your experience, what failures make government funding streams particularly susceptible to fraud?
Well, as I outlined in my opening statement and my written testimony, basically we're spending far more money than we have the operational capacity to monitor. Like they're just, now Deputy U.S. Attorney, he was U.S. Attorney at the time, Joe Thompson, said, we can't prosecute our way out of this. That's another way of saying it. We have to have controls on the front end.
Well, and with the massive amounts like I just talked to you about in COVID, you know, it actually it gives the environment for fraud. It just builds on it, right?
Correct.
Well, Ms. Rarick, what concrete actions did the Walz administration take to intimidate whistleblowers into silence?
So I think the first thing he did was he put in place commissioners. Right now, we have a deputy commissioner over Department of Human Services that is known to whistleblowers as being like the queen of retaliation. So when you put somebody in charge that is known to retaliate, that's a problem. I would also note on your previous question about the COVID money, and we discovered in our committee that the auditor, so there was a bid for auditing the COVID money, and the auditor was known to be our Minnesota State Auditor, Blaha. So that's another Democrat within the whole fold of the Democrats in Walz as well.
Would it surprise you that we spent $13 trillion from Bill Clinton to Donald Trump in that span of time? $13 trillion with not a single receipt.
That is absolutely shocking. I used to do accounting, and that's deplorable. That's something that you should be in prison for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, the United States has no obligation to tolerate guests who break our laws. And in this case, there seems like there's a whole bunch of them. And unfortunately, they were targeting one general area. And it's sad to me that we are always being screamed at about xenophobia, all this different type of phobias, and racist, and yet the facts still stand. So, Mr. Chairman, I find it very interesting today's hearing, and I applaud you for doing it. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you. Gentleman now, our chair now recognizes
Mr. Chairman,
the
could I-
lady from Texas, Ms. Jasmine Crockett.
Mr. Chairman,
you
ma'am,
so
you
much.
see,
I'm sorry, Ms. Crockett. Chair recognizes Mr. Biggs.
I apologize for that.
That's right.
There's some more you see. Senator John Kennedy brings Somali fraud to the Senate floor. Viral videos, David says he filed complaint against Walz over fraud allegations. Minnesota adds Medicaid fraud verification amid alleged $9 billion loss. Minnesota's Somali fraudsters paid for rich lifestyles with stolen money. What investigators still haven't asked about Minnesota's fraud, I hope to ask that. Trump deploys 2,000 federal agents to Minnesota. Venezuela's been dealt with. Somali scammers should be next. Beyond parody, Craigslist ad from a daycare center in Minneapolis seeks to hire 20 child actors. Dr. Oz orders full-scale federal audit of Minnesota Medicaid. Did you miss a story about alleged Medicaid fraud from a Somali-run health services provider in Maine? A YouTuber's follow-up video on Minnesota fraud is just as wild. HHS to close Biden-era loophole that lets states pay child care providers without counting attendance. Yield back. Thank you.
Without objection, so ordered. Chair now recognizes Ms. Jasmine Crockett from Texas.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and for every witness that is here, thank you so much for your time and your attention. I just have one quick question. I have not been here the entire hearing, but I don't think this question has been posed for each of you, and we can start at the far end. Do you believe that all Somalis are engaged in fraud?
I do not, and I'd like to.
Okay, just yes or no. Next.
Of course not.
Oh, absolutely not. We have good Somali people in our state.
Okay.
Absolutely not.
Okay, thank you so much. I just want to make sure I level set because it seems like we want to continue to, especially as we just heard those particular articles entered into the record, we want to continue to just make it seem as if you are Somali, then somehow you are a fraudster. And this administration has decided that it wants a target on their backs. And so when my colleague, Ms. Randall, decided that she wanted to talk about the threats that are being made towards various Somali people, the reason she brought it up is because this particular side of the aisle has a tendency of if one person does something bad, especially if they are an immigrant, then we are going to cast aside that entire community. So I wanted to level set, and I appreciate your honesty because that's something that we very rarely get from my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. In fact, if we want to talk about fraud, I got a lot of fraud that we're going to talk about because we're going to get into this, but I am very curious to hear. Let me ask you, Mr. Ballou, are you aware of allegations that $50,000 in taxpayer dollars have been given to someone that is currently sitting in this administration by the name of Tom Homan. Are you aware? Okay, that's a yes.
I am.
Okay. And last I checked, and correct me if I'm wrong if you have different information, but he was given that $50,000 in exchange for being able to provide contracts and kickbacks to people as soon as Trump was going to get into office. The DOJ was actually investigating this, but as soon as Trump got into office, last I checked, he actually said, go ahead and throw away that case.
So it was a Department of Justice investigation, and he accepted the money from an undercover FBI agent in cash.
Are you aware as to whether or not we ever got that $50,000 back?
I'm not.
Oh, okay. Are you aware as to whether or not this committee has decided to investigate that?
I'm not.
Are you aware as to whether or not any committee in Congress has decided to investigate the fact that we know that he took $50,000 from an undercover officer, and yet we still don't have that money, nor does he have any charges?
I'm not.
Oh, okay. All right. So let's get into it. We're living through the most corrupt presidential administration in American history, a $300 million ballroom, a $230 million payout from the Department of Justice because the president got his feelings hurt because he had to be investigated for being a criminal. Hundreds of thousands of taxpayer dollars spent at Trump-owned properties around the country, Trump-branded wine being sold at the Coast Guard exchanges, American taxpayer dollars being spent on DHS propaganda ads on Truth Social, awarding federal contracts to corporations in exchange for campaign contributions. Kash Patel flew his girlfriend around the country on a multi-million-dollar jet that taxpayers paid for. Kristi Noem gave companies she's affiliated with hundreds of millions of tax dollars, then went out and spent another $200 million on 2 private jets for her travel. For 12 months, this administration has been taking billions of taxpayer dollars from American people and have been giving it away to their own companies in the form of tax cuts, government contracts, or other government funded subsidies. So Congress has a role in getting rid of fraud, I will admit that, in any federally funded government program. However, I think the fraud that the American people are concerned about is that the Republicans are taking away Americans' health care so that ultra billionaires can get more tax cuts. The real fraud is the dehumanization and demonization of the working class Americans and immigrants to distract folks away from corporate socialism that's happening because of the Republicans. So this is truly the definition of throwing away the baby with the bathwater. The Republican philosophy is that if the cost of living for the average American increases, they're on their own. But if the cost of doing business increases for the wealthiest people on earth, well, then it's the government job to bail them out. But I want to get to my last question because, Mr. Ballou, I got to give you a chance. He's been issuing pardons for numerous people who have defrauded the American people. And Republicans on this committee, yeah, just as quiet as the room just got, right? So, Mr. Ballou, talk to me about how the Trump administration has welcomed fraud across government by purging DOJ attorneys and shuttering ethics office across the federal government.
Well, you know, one of the things that's been a common theme in this discussion so far is potential government employee involvement in some of these schemes. That hasn't been proven yet, but it does seem to be alleged. The concern that I have is the office that would prosecute that in the Department of Justice, the Public Integrity Section, has been largely defunded and decimated.
Thank you so much. And my time has expired, but I do have some UCs, Mr. Chairman.
You want to do them now?
I do.
Okay.
The first one is from Truth Out. Trump grants clemency to executive who led $205 million Medicare fraud scheme.
Without objection, it's ordered.
The next one is Trump commutes sentence of Dr. Solomon Melgen, eye doctor, found guilty of Medicare fraud.
Without objection, it's ordered.
The next one, healthcare fraudster Philip Esfermaze is latest Trump clemency recipient to be arrested. He defrauded more than $1 billion from Medicare.
Without objection, it's ordered.
Trump pardons nursing home owner and supporter convicted of $7 million in tax evasion.
Without objection, it's ordered.
Trump
and we'll
pardons-
want all that stuff to put in the record. So,
I
okay.
will. I
All
got
right.
you. Trump pardons cost victims and taxpayers $1.3 billion, House Judiciary Committee Democrats review says.
All right, without objection, so ordered. Chair now recognizes Mr. Big.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Chair
Mr.
recognizes Ms.
Chairman?
Mace. Chair recognizes.
I have a request to be recognized to make a motion.
I'm sorry?
I have a request to be recognized to make a motion.
Yes, go ahead.
I move that the committee issue a subpoena to the Department of Homeland Security and the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services for all records related to the immigration and naturalization of, or any immigration benefit received by Ilhan Omar of Minnesota, Ahmed Abdi Salan Irsi, also known as Ahmed Aden, Ahmed Nur Saeed Elmi, and any members of Ilhan Omar's family.
Okay, another motion is made. The committee will hold this motion in abeyance until the end of today's hearing. The committee will now proceed with today's hearing. Thank you, Ms. Mason. Chair recognizes Mr. Biggs from Arizona.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A report that came out yesterday indicates that on average, almost $1 million a day in cash is being sent from Minnesota out of the country by a small group of Somali carriers. Are any of you familiar with that on the panel?
I'm not familiar with that particular story, but that story has been in Minnesota for a long time, where millions of dollars has gone out of MSTP, our airport, in cash to Somalia.
Mr. Chairman, I ask that this be admitted as part of
Without
the record.
objection, so ordered.
Thank you. The Biden administration required states to pay health care and daycare providers before verifying any attendance at a daycare and before care was delivered.
That's fine.
Would you say that policy facilitated the funneling of funds or defrauding of government funds? We'll start with, we'll go down the panel. We'll start with Representative Robbins, please.
My understanding is that there weren't ever enough internal controls, but under Medicaid rules, the Walz administration already had the opportunity to stop payment when there were credible allegations of fraud. They had the opportunity to do prepayment review. They could do all of those things, and they did not use those tools.
Ms.
Not,
Hudson.
not only does paying people before they deliver a service introduce an obvious opportunity for people to abscond with public dollars, but we've heard these arguments in our communities back in Minnesota from Minnesota Democrats that it's just so important that we pay people up front because they can't afford to wait for the reimbursements.
Yeah, Ms. Rarick.
Yeah, this is absolutely counter to good accounting and good accountability. So I would definitely say that you should be providing the service and getting paid after.
Mr. Ballou, what do you think?
I can't speak to that policy only because I'm learning about it just now, but I will say, you know, my primary...
So then the question then is, do you think it's a good idea to pay for the service up front before it's delivered and without accounting?
You know, I can only speak to the criminal side of things, not the administrative side, but my concern here, again, is to the extent that there would be violations because of that change, the office responsible for prosecuting those
Yeah, okay,
crimes
so
would be
that's,
largely-
so you didn't want to answer the question, you want to filibuster. Thanks, brother. Appreciate it. Now, here where we're going to go is, one of the things that you mentioned, Representative Robbins, is physical facilities and real estate. And as we've seen and looked at this, as I've looked at this, all of the public reporting that's out there, looked at a little bit of Exhibit A, that's like 2,800 pages or 2,300, whatever it is. Didn't get to look at all of it, but looked at some of it. I want to know, did anybody go in and find out who's owning all these properties? Because you have basically vacant properties ostensibly holding themselves out to be daycare centers. Who owns those properties? Anybody look into that?
So some of our staff is looking at it currently, and I would encourage people to think about this as you look at your other states. So we have people who own the properties and then other people related to them or close to them that provide the services, and they both get remuneration. And then we have people who homestead assisted living facilities, small single-family homes, and say it's a business, but then they shouldn't be allowed to homestead. We have instances where there are multiple assisted living facilities that have been homesteaded. So the ownership of the properties and the ownership of the business is very important. This has gotten to be such a problem in Minnesota that people invest in the daycare business as an investment. And so getting not only who runs the facility, but who the ownership is critical, because that's where a lot of the money goes.
That's my point, is that you're setting up a series and facilitating straw man purchases of actual real property to actually launder or hide money coming from the state and defraud the state. And I would encourage both the feds and the state to really take a close look at that. I did find it interesting. Well, let me just ask the last question I've got time for here is, well, I got to ask two. The $18 billion, I'm saying $18 billion, that's the total nut over the last 5 years, if I understand your testimony right, Representative Hudson, and half of it was defrauded.
That is the estimate from the U.S. Attorney's Office.
Okay. Has the Waltz administration put into place any new procedures since this has come to a very viral head in the last, 6 weeks?
They've appointed a couple of guys and shifted around a couple of chairs on the deck, but it's the equivalent of throwing a glass of water at a stove that's on fire.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I have a few more UCs, if I may.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Victims shocked after Biden grants clemency to Kids for Cash judge and $54 million embezzler. Shocked. Biden clemency for convicted fraudsters met with outrage. It's a slap in the face. Comer on Fox News. Biden crime family pardons serve as a confession of their corruption. Biden pardons more people in his criminal clan and commutes sentence of Leonard Peltier. Op-ed from the former legislative auditor, Jim Nobles, what's the right number? And then finally, Mr. Chairman, 18 U.S. Code 666, theft or bribery concerning programs receiving federal funds seems apt in this case. Mr. Chairman, I'll yield back. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes Ms. Presley from Massachusetts.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me just begin by making this plain. Credible fraud must be investigated and prevented. Every dollar that is stolen from public programs is a dollar that is taken from a child who needs care, a senior who needs food, or a family that is already struggling to make ends meet. Ms. Robbins, I want to just begin with a basic question, and please answer yes or no. When someone is convicted of defrauding the public, do you believe that they should be held accountable?
Yes.
So if we're serious about fraud, then we also have to be serious about accountability. Ms. Robbins, do you mind just expounding, what does accountability look like to you?
We want to prosecute everyone who's committed a crime, and we want to fire officials in the agencies that are liable for allowing the failure of internal controls.
Okay, so Ms. Robbins, let me be more clear. What should happen to fraudsters who steal public dollars?
They should go to jail.
So in my opinion, accountability means restitution. It means consequences, like incarceration, that help ensure that it doesn't happen again, as a real deterrent and accountability. It means that money taken from families and the public is returned to them. But that is not the standard that is being set by Donald Trump, who is wielding his clemency authority to allow fraudsters to escape accountability altogether. Last month, my office published a clemency report titled Trump's Clemency Gap, How Trump's Pardons Are Ignoring the People Who Need Them the Most. I ask unanimous consent to enter this into the record. Thank you. Now to the witnesses who serve in the Minnesota State Legislature on the Fraud Prevention Committee, let's walk through these pardons for fraudsters, and we all care about fraud. So Ms. Robbins, Mr. Hudson, and Ms. Rarick, Donald Trump pardoned George Santos, who defrauded voters and owed them $370,000 in restitution to victims. Raise your hand if you oppose this pardon. Thank you, Mr. Balloon.
Ma'am, I would have to look at the law and the facts of the case. We cannot know the facts of all these individual cases.
Don't deflect. This is a very public case. You know who George Santos is. You know exactly what he did. We just agreed that, fraud is unacceptable. And you just talked about accountability. You said if people commit fraud and exploit the public good, that they should be incarcerated. So this is not a complicated question. So I will give you all one more opportunity. Ms. Robbins, Mr. Hudson, and Ms. Rarick, raise your hand if you oppose the pardon of George Santos.
Not playing this game.
It's not a game. It's real life. It's not a game at all. Okay, but I will take your refusal to go on record, not only as cowardice, but that you do agree with that pardon. of that fraudster. Moving on, Donald Trump also gave, and this has never been done before, presidential pardons to corporations that committed fraud. One example is the crypto company BitMEX that violated U.S. law and was fined $100 million. Now raise your hand if you oppose Trump's pardon of this crypto company.
Not participating.
Thank you, Mr. Ballou. Okay, again, I'll take your refusal to raise your hand in opposition. That means that you support this pardon of this corporation that frauded folks to the tune of $100 million.
Refusal to participate is not an
reclaiming
expression.
Reclaiming
Refusal
my time.
to participate
Do
is
you know
not
the
an
rules of
expression
committee?
one way or
Do you
the
know
other.
the rules of committee? This is my
I
time.
know that I am
Do
here
not speak
as
over
a member
me.
of the public.
Reclaiming my time. You are
that
not,
you
Mr. Chair.
serve.
Mr. Chair.
That's what I know.
You are not in order with the rules of the committee. This is my time. This is my time.
And it's
I
our
asked the
dollars.
questions and you answer, but you're too much of a coward to answer. So we're going to move on. Now, yesterday was the 5-year anniversary, and I want to note of the January 6th insurrection. And on Donald Trump's first day in office, he pardoned 1,500 insurrectionists, including Brian Christopher Mock, who's from Minnesota. Are y'all going to say you don't know who that is? He's from Minnesota. Now, he kicked, shoved, and threw a flagpole at police officers, you know, law enforcement that you claim to support. And he did all of that in the name of fraud. He was an election denier, so an election fraud lie. Now, he claims he did these things in the name of patriotism, but really he's just a criminal. So raise your hand if you oppose Trump's pardon of this Minnesota individual.
Ma'am, this grandstanding nonsense
This is not grandstanding.
exactly
This is
what
accountability.
Minnesotans hate about D.C.
This is accountability, and you are hypocrites. So again, I will take your
Thanks for
refusal to
demonstrating
not
my opening
Mr.
statement.
Chairman,
reclaiming
order,
my
decorum.
time.
She's off the
Reclaiming
rails.
my time. I'm not off the rails, please.
You are
Enough
totally
with your
off the
tropes.
rails.
Nancy,
Order.
enough
Off the
with your
rails.
tropes. Give me
Order.
my time back.
Order, Mr. Chairman.
If Republicans
didn't
were
come here to be
serious about
accused
reclaiming
by
my
somebody
time,
who's supposed to serve me. You
Restore the
serve
time.
me
Reclaiming
and
my
my
time.
constituents.
You have no time left.
You
You're
don't get to
overtime.
accuse me of things in this
You're
chamber.
overtime.
You're out of
Order.
time.
Reclaiming my
You're out of
time.
time.
There's no
You're
time
out of
left.
time. We're done
You're
here.
not
We're
gonna have
done.
time.
Touch in out of time.
At least 10
You didn't lose
seconds.
any
She's out of
seconds.
time.
Time's
Restore the
expired.
Out of
time.
order
My
and
time
out
is
of time.
expired.
Ms. Presley,
You
you've
all are
already
very
secured your
unserious.
MSNBC spot tonight.
I'm
Your
not
time's
I'm
required.
looking for
Chair
accountability,
recognizes Ms.
and you
Mays
want to
from
We're
run
gonna be
from the
so
good on
hypocrisy
MSNBC.
of your
recognizes
king
Ms. Mays.
and this administration.
Thank you, Mr.
Chair
Chairman.
recognizes Ms.
And
Mays.
Mr. Chairman, I agree. She's
don't
going to be
care
a great
about
host on
hungry children. You wanna be
MSNBC.
cutting
This is
Medicaid.
my
I
time.
wouldn't want to jump
I
in front of
reclaim
Ms.
my
Mays if I
time.
were you, Ms.
I
Presley.
reclaim my time. This is my time.
I wouldn't want to interrupt Ms. Mays. It's her time. Chair recognizes Ms. Oh,
Mr. Chair,
You're out of order.
she did not get all of her time.
Mr. Chairman,
She
she's
wants
still
to
out of
insult us
order.
for 10 more seconds.
What do
your
we have
time
to
is
do to
expired.
get this
Chair-
woman in order?
Her time is expired. Chair recognizes
You're
Ms.
going
Mays.
to be great on TV. You're really good. No, baby, you're not. No, baby, you're not. You are not in order. You're out of order. Goodbye. You're done. Mr. Chairman, it's my
Chair
5
recognizes
minutes.
Ms. Mason.
Are we
We're-
good here? Mr.
got it.
Chairman, thank you. As I listen to the witnesses answer questions today, I'm struck by the truly breathtaking amount of fraud, the scope and scale perpetrated against the American people by Somalians in Minnesota, screeching Democrats, like you just heard, at our witnesses. Democrats on this committee don't want to talk about Minnesota fraud because Minnesota fraud is Democrat fraud. You're going to make a great host on MSNBC. You're going to be great. And this is a cover-up. I mean, the very definition of cover-up. And so while we're still trying to understand the scale of the fraud, it appears that the amount of fraud we are talking about could exceed the size of GDP in Somalia, the size of its economy is what we're talking about. So let that sink in, the amount of fraud we're talking about. My first question is this, Mr. Balyu, this afternoon. Should Somalians in Minnesota be required to speak English, their citizens?
One,
Yes
I'm
or
here-
no?
I'm here
Should they
for
be
the
required
legal-
to speak English if they're American citizens?
I think that question is really inappropriate.
Should they? It's not inappropriate. This is the United States of America. Do you speak English? Should Americans speak English? Citizens speak English? Yes or no?
Point of inquiry, is English the official language of the United States? It's a question I don't
Mr.
know.
Chairman, I'm being
That's
interrupted again
not a
by
valid
another.
parliamentary inquiry.
I would like to
Chair, is
reclaim
that
my
a
time,
citizenship
Mr.
requirement?
Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to reclaim my time.
she's
That
asking
seems
the
to be a
witness.
popular
She's
theme
asking
today.
That's not a
She's asking-
valid
I
inquiry.
just- it's a
Stop
point of
the
inquiry.
clock.
Women
That's
have
not
a right to
valid
speak in
inquiry.
this
Finish my
committee.
point.
Conservative
She's
women have the right to
asking-
speak
she's
here
asking
and
the
not be
witness something.
interrupted by
Daylight
my
cut
male
her short.
colleagues.
Mr. Preston's already got
Mr.
that
Chairman.
MSNBC slot.
I would
Chair
like to
recognizes
reclaim
Ms.
my
Mays.
time. I lost like 10 seconds there.
Okay, we'll give you 10 seconds.
Okay, my next question is, should Somalians who committed fraud be denaturalized and deported, Mr. Bayou?
Again,
Yes
I'm not
or
sure
no?
that's an appropriate question because the majority of Somali
So if you
Minnesotans
commit
are
fraud in
citizens.
this country and you are here from Somalia, you don't believe they should be denaturalized and deported? How
Again,
much
most-
fraud would it take for you to want to denaturalize and deport someone who committed fraud in this country? How much?
Again,
A
Ms. Mays,
billion? 9 billion? 19 billion? What would it take for you?
most Somali Minnesotans are citizens.
Right, and the ones that committed fraud, the question was, if you understand English, should be, those who committed fraud, should they be denaturalized and deported? The Somalians who are here, the ones that can't speak English.
Yeah, so under U.S. law.
Okay,
the
my next
basis-
question for
Excuse me,
you
Can I please finish the
is,
question?
no, you can't because you're not answering the question. My next question is, this is yes or no. If you marry your brother and you commit immigration fraud, should you be denaturalized and deported? If you
Again,
commit immigration fraud, yes or no?
Again, that question seems really inappropriate, and if I can get
Well, you
back to your
can't
question.
answer my question, so that's probably more inappropriate. Can you name one significant contribution to Minnesota from a Somali immigrant who can't speak English?
Absolutely, yes, but again, this is.
You didn't name one. All right, so my next questions are going to be for the Honorable Ms. Robbins. Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here today. I heard some discussion earlier about al-Shabaab and the discovery that you believe some of this money that was defrauded the U.S. government went to al-Shabaab. Is that correct? Did I hear that right?
Yes, it's been proven.
How much money are we talking about?
You know, we don't have an amount. So there's been specific cases where it's been charged where we have an amount, but then of the millions that go to Somali over the years in remittances, a portion of that we understand is taken as sort of a tax or corruption by al-Shabaab when it enters the country.
Can
But
you explain to us who al-Shabaab is?
it's a terrorist organization in Somalia.
And they're affiliated with al-Qaeda, is that right?
My understanding is they are.
I am on the DNI website where it tells me that since 2014, al-Shabaab has killed more U.S. citizens than any other al-Qaeda affiliate. And as of 2025, al-Shabaab, this group is al-Qaeda's wealthiest component. Can you believe that?
Yes.
And that American tax dollars through Minnesota, through Governor Tim Walz, who shamefully had to resign from his reelection the other day. Thank you to the young YouTuber Nick Shirley. This is the kind of thing that was happening in Minnesota. So I praise the Republicans who are here today from the Minnesota State Legislature exposing this fraud. And then, Ms. Robbins, when do you think Tim Walz became aware of the fraud?
I think he's been aware of it since the beginning. This was a huge issue in our state in the year he ran for governor, and the OLA reports came out, first identifying the child care fraud in March and April of 2019 when he was in the first months of his term.
Was Keith Ellison in on it too, knowledgeable, the Catholic turned Muslim guy in Minnesota?
Yes, they were all newly in office, and this was very public knowledge in Minnesota.
What role do you think Tim Walz and Keith Ellison played, his administration, in delaying investigations into the fraud?
So I've outlined several things where they stopped our ability to strengthen internal controls, and they also shut down the criminal investigations by the OIG in DHS.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back. I do have two articles, Mr. Chairman, that I would like to ask
Proceed,
unanimous
proceed.
consent. This one on foxnews.com, Minnesota fraud probe will expand to other states. And then on house.gov, legislators blast DHS for revelations it had contracts with feeding our future fraudsters.
Without objection to
Thank you,
order,
Mr. Chairman.
somebody else seek recognition. Chair recognizes Ms. Ansari.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to start with the UC request, an article from the Washington Post titled, "Trump Amplifies Conspiracy Theories on Killing of Minnesota Lawmaker." As we know, the president shared a video.
Without objection to order.
Thank you. So I want to start with this question for the lawmakers here from Minnesota. As you know, Donald Trump has been posting these conspiracy theories about the linking Governor Walz to the killing of your former speaker and insinuating that Governor Walz had something to do with it. Can you please raise your hand if you think this is an appropriate action by the President of the United States? Raise your hand, please.
I'm not doing a raise your hand. I'm
Do you
happy
think
to
it's
comment on
appropriate?
it.
Sure, is it appropriate for the President to do that?
So the person who murdered our colleague, Speaker Melissa Hortman, and her husband, Mark,
Answer the
had
question. Do you
in
think it's
his-
appropriate for the
in his
President of the
vehicle
United States
evidence saying
to cause
he
violence
thought
against a
Tim
sitting
Walz
governor?
was ordering him to do it. I know the facts will come out in the case, and we need to be respectful of the Hortman family, and we need to let this play out in the courts.
That is unacceptable. It is inappropriate to the highest degree for the President of the United States to be sharing conspiracy theories that are obviously going to lead to violence directed at Governor Tim Walz. Now, moving on to the issue here today, we all care deeply about combating waste, fraud, preventing corruption, and holding bad actors accountable. Unfortunately, this country has seen an unprecedented avalanche of such abuse in the past year, all stemming from the Trump administration, the most corrupt and the most wasteful administration in American history. It is truly amazing that the majority moved so quickly to hold basically an emergency hearing on the situation in Minnesota without ever one time having held a hearing on the national crisis that is the Trump criminal enterprise being run out of the White House. I don't even know where to begin. Maybe the Republican majority would be interested in holding a hearing on the $50,000 cash bribe that Borders' Tom Homan received from FBI undercover agents in a kava bag. Or how about a hearing on the $400 million bribe that Donald Trump presented by multi-billion-dollar companies in the form of the White House ballroom that Donald Trump seems most obsessed with? Do Republicans have any interest in holding a hearing on that corruption scandal? Or the fraudsters and the criminals that Donald Trump has pardoned? He freed George Santos, convicted of theft of public funds. He pardoned Paul Walzak, convicted of millions of dollars in tax fraud after Walzak's mother raised money for Trump's campaign. He released the former president of Honduras, sentenced to 45 years for flooding the United States with oceans of cocaine. And these are just a few examples. I haven't even brought up Doge and Elon Musk corruptions, Trump's firing of inspectors general who are in place to root out fraud, and career U.S. attorneys who are doing the bidding of Donald Trump in prosecuting his personal and political enemies. Is there any interest in holding an oversight hearing on any of those issues? Now, I want to talk about one specifically appalling instance of blatant corruption in the Trump White House, reported by the New York Times, that the Republican majority has shown literally zero interest in investigating. This is regarding World Liberty Financial, the cryptocurrency company founded in 2024 by Eric Trump, Donald Trump Jr., Alex Witkoff, and Zach Witkoff, among others. If those names sound familiar, it is because the company is a joint project by the Trump and Witkoff families, Steve Witkoff being Trump's special envoy in the Middle East. You may think that the president's financial interest in a secretive cryptocurrency exchange may be bad enough, but it gets so much worse than that. Emirati investment firm MGX invested $2 billion in the Trump-Witkoff crypto business, personally enriching the sitting president of the United States, his family, and Witkoff as a White House employee. This is at the same time that Witkoff is an envoy to the Middle East. He's the one negotiating with the Emiratis as an official representative of the United States government. While Witkoff and his sons were negotiating this private crypto deal, Steve Witkoff was also in charge of negotiating with the very same officials as a U.S. official to give the Emiratis something they desperately wanted from us: highly advanced and specialized computer chips. To make the corruption even more explicit, just after the crypto deal went through, Donald Trump gave his go-ahead for the transfer of hundreds of thousands of advanced chips to the Emiratis, despite the extremely concerning national security implications. It's perhaps one of the largest and most obvious corruption schemes in U.S. history, implicating a foreign government paying off the President of the United States and the White House to the tune of literally billions of dollars in exchange for sensitive U.S. technologies. So please let the Republicans spare us with their feigned concerns about waste, fraud, and corruption. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Chair recognizes Mr. Fallon from Texas.
Thank you. We're here today in this hearing because there exists damning and Thank you. Mr. Chairman, thank you. We're here today in this hearing because there exists damning and overwhelming evidence of massive industrial scale fraud occurring in Minnesota right now, and it's been going on for years. This is a huge story, and while many want to ignore it, deflect from it, or be masters of obfuscation, which we have seen here today, this should be a page one, front and center, above the fold headline for media outlets across the country. But it's not, and I think it's very interesting. ABC, NBC, CBS, you can find 74 stories today run before you even get a hint of this scandal. This should be a headline, and unfortunately, it's a back page fine print. Still, as bad as the network's coverage, albeit, it's ludicrously abysmal, it's better than CNN. This very morning, CNN ran 51 stories on its website, including such riveting breaking news articles such as dogs that are trained to sniff mold, a flock of gay sheep, K-pop's newest release entitled Demon Hunters, inside glimpse of P. Diddy Combs' prison cell, and Chinese robots playing soccer, but nary a mention of the tens of billions of dollars of American taxpayer money that's been stolen from honest folks in America by scumbag thieves. This is the Oversight Committee. We should have one overriding emotion, whether it's Republican or Democrat. We should all be outraged that crooks and thieves and dirtbags are robbing the American people. So I was very curious as to see how the Democrats would play today. Would they expose this fraud and be willing to work with us, or would they go to their playbook of Donald Trump bad, and when we were in Doge, it was Elon Musk and billionaires bad, and they haven't really disappointed. January 6th as well has been mentioned, has nothing to do with what we're talking about today. The ranking member's opening comments even bizarrely talked about presidential pardons, and he railed against POTUS. It's nothing to do with the matter at hand. But for the record, Joe Biden issued 250% more pardons and commutations than Donald Trump. In fact, 2,545 more. Again, back to the matter. This money's been stolen systemically by a gang of thieves while the very people charged with the oversight, namely the Waltz administration, have been complicit. They've looked the other way. And the Democrats didn't disappoint either with ists, isms, and phobes, quotes like bigotry and hatred, and we're hypocritical witch hunt, and then they were taking a hero, Nick Shirley, trying to make him a villain. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to enter into the record an article, "It's Not Racist to Notice Somali Fraud."
Without objection, so ordered.
98 defendants that have been charged thus far in this case, and I think it'll end up being hundreds, 85 of them happen to be of Somalian descent. It's just a fact, despite how unfortunate and inconvenient these truths may be to leftists. The Assistant U.S. Attorney Joe Thompson thinks that this fraud can equivalent to maybe $9 billion. The entire federal budget of the country Somalia is $1.2 billion. Medicaid fraud does exist in all 50 states, but uncovering it aggressively clearly is not a blue state priority. If you talk to any expert, I was in the state legislature for 8 years, they will tell you objectively that no matter where it is, about 10 to 20% of all Medicaid spending is fraudulent. In the state of New York, they spent $96 billion. So did they recover in fraud $9.6 billion, $960 million? No, it was a pittance. It was 0.06% was recovered. In the state of Minnesota, $18 billion. It was 0.08% recovered. Representative Robbins and the other reps, thank you for coming. Thank you for your courage. You know you're going to be, smeared, and I'm not going to ask you, raise your hand. We're going to have a conversation, okay? When, Ms. Robbins, Representative Robbins, when you first uncovered this tectonic fraud, what was the reaction and actions taken by the Walz administration and your Democratic colleagues? Was it working hand in hand to create synergy and offer full support and help to unmask this fraud, or did you face significant headwinds and fierce pushback to the point of opposition?
Throughout our hearings, they would either deny or deflect or say, oh, they've handled it, or they're new on the job and they don't know. So those were the answers in the tenor of our hearing. I provided documents to them outlining, as I said, in February of 72 child care centers I thought they should look at. They haven't done it. I've sent 6 FOIA requests or data requests that have not been responded to. So they have not been good partners in rooting this out.
So block votes in Minnesota in 2016, it was so close that I think Hillary Clinton won the state by about 44,000 votes. But if you have block 50,000 you can rely on in Minneapolis, that's rather helpful to win an election in Minnesota. But you know what, Mr. Chairman? Our Democratic colleagues, whether they be in Minnesota or here on this Oversight Committee, they'll eventually learn. I'll yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes Mr. Bell from Missouri.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Ranking Member, and our witnesses for being here today. I believe in protecting our social services and recognize the need for comprehensive legislation that ensures transparency in the collection and use of federal funds to support these critical programs that serve our communities in need. The resources provided through social services ensure the welfare of the everyday person and family, and these resources and individuals deserve to be protected. These protections should come at all times, not just when politically beneficial. What we're witnessing from President Trump and this administration is an attempt to use social services and the welfare of the American people as pawns to promote their political agenda. Instead of caring for the challenges of the average person, this administration has deprived them of the very things that the president promised, which is affordable health care, housing, and relief from the rising cost of living. Through rolling back essential health care affordability, cutting funding for assistance programs, implementing harmful tariffs, and advancing legislation such as the One Big Ugly Bill, the administration's actions have ultimately caused more harm than good for the American people. Reports show that since taking office, President Trump has raised the average cost of living. Health insurance costs have risen by hundreds of dollars for the average person, with insurance plans increasing by more than 20%. Housing costs remain at an all-time high. And everyday grocery items show a steady increase, with prices rising by 15 to 20%. We cannot pick and choose when to care for the American people. The actions of this administration show a pattern. They first target our most vulnerable communities and then gut the very resources to help them. Today, it is our Somali communities and our child care assistance. Tomorrow, it could be your communities and the resources you and your family rely on for well-being. At its core, this is about the well-being of the American people. If we truly cared about those we have sworn to represent, we would be working to dismantle all the challenges they face, not just the ones that serve political interests. Mr. Baloo, President Trump has recently made comments on efforts to freeze child care funding in California, Colorado, Illinois, and New York. Would these actions benefit or harm children and families?
Oh, of course they're going to harm it.
President Trump has fired thousands of employees across critical departments and has issued Executive Order 14356, restricting agencies from filling vacant positions or creating new ones unless approved under the order or required by law. Can you speak to how these actions could harm the government's ability to root out waste, fraud, and abuse?
Absolutely. So, it's going to make it harder both to administer these services and then to identify fraud in the first place. One of the things that I'm particularly concerned about is to go after fraud. One of the easiest ways to do it is to prosecute tax crimes. The challenge that we've got right now is the administration has announced a plan to disband the tax division of the Department of Justice entirely. And that's going to make it much harder to prosecute these sorts of crimes.
And can you speak from your work as a federal prosecutor on how President Trump's actions have contradicted his promises to the American people?
Well, to the extent that this administration says that it cares about waste, fraud, and abuse, it seems like that is a selective care. You can look at cases like Paul Walzak, who, was convicted of fraud and withheld $10 million to his own employees in nursing homes. His mother attended a $1 million plate fundraiser with the president, and Mr. Walzak was quickly pardoned. This has happened literally dozens of times where favored defendants either had their prosecutions dropped or were pardoned entirely.
Okay. Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes Mr. Grofman from Wisconsin.
Sure. I'm sorry we had another briefing in the building, so I don't want to go over past things. But during your initial testimony, Ms. Rarick, you talked about people being threatened who are whistleblowers. Do you know who those people were? Were they like people who made money off of this, political operatives? Could you elaborate on that a little?
Yes, thank you. So the people that were doing the threatening were the supervisors and directors within the state agencies.
So state employees were physically threatening whistleblowers.
They were saying things like, what happens if you lose your home, right? Because if you lose your job, you lose your home. They had pictures in their personnel files of their own homes and their cars. They asked where their children went to school and where their bus stop was. So there was direct threats and indirect threats.
Okay. Were any of these people brought to justice, or this is just the way they deal with things in Minnesota?
It's an interesting thing within the Walz administration. Those people were promoted.
He just defines evil, doesn't he? Almost Vice President of the United States. There's a good book out there called The Tragedy of American Compassion. And in it, they went over the history of welfare and whether it should be done by the state or done privately. And they pointed out the danger that certain nefarious politicians would always want more welfare because they were buying votes. Do you, either one of you, on the political realm of things, feel that perhaps a motive for all the crookedness is, given the size of government today, the important who wins elections? Were they motivated a little bit by getting votes of groups of people? Is this a danger to we're not a democracy, of course, but is it a danger to our form of government?
So I'll answer really quickly, and then I'll pass it over to Representative Hudson. Just really quickly, the caveat to this, which is so bizarre in Minnesota, is the fact that state employees, by and large, are Democrats, and they vote Democrat. And the Walz administration, including Flanagan and his former chief of staff, Schmitter, were so brutal that these former Democrat employees want nothing to do with the Democrat Party anymore in Minnesota because they have been treated so horrifically.
What's so sinister about this is that you're right, that it absolutely is for electoral benefit and political benefit, but it's sold to one half of the population, and to the independents and to the conservatives, as we're giving people a hand up. We're going to help people who are in need. We're going to give them a temporary way back into working life. But they've set up an industry that's perpetual, where people just stay where they're at.
Right. So there's really an electoral incentive to make sure people don't get out of poverty. I'll give you another question. I used to be in the state legislature myself in Wisconsin, and I know that when we put together your budget, you have Fed funds, unlike money that, Wisconsin was getting in through our own income or sales tax. Insofar as the legislature is playing with Fed funds, you're not exactly as maybe careful with every dollar that's flowing through. And I'm trying to think what we can do to prevent this, because you're always going to have given political parties who think they can benefit from government largesse. And I think government by its nature is sometimes a little sloppy. Do you think the Minnesota government would be a little bit more careful here if on the various programs, and it varies from program to program, but if the state had to pick up 10 or 15 or 20 or 30% of the program so that they had skin in the game?
Thank you, sir. Yes, in a lot of these programs, the state does have skin in the game. So many of them, Minnesota roughly has a 50-50 Medicaid match. So many of them, it's federal tax dollars, but it's also state tax dollars. So we are paying for it twice, for our state tax dollars and then when we pay our
Right.
federal.
I know, I think Wisconsin, when I was there, it was about a 60-40 match with the feds picking up 60. And that came into play. But I gather there's some programs on here that maybe the state match is 0. Is that accurate?
I would have to look at each program. I don't know for sure.
Okay. I'll ask you, just as state legislators, and different state legislators look at this question differently. Do you think as a country on some of these programs, we should be asking, some of the programs that are 100% Fed funded now, we'd be better off if they were maybe 70% Fed funded or 75% Fed funded, so the states that have a little bit more of a skin in the game, I'll put it that way. And a concern I would have, insofar as there are programs which the state is picking up nothing, really the incentive is to have more graft because you just bring in Fed funds for the state.
Yes, sir. So we need to make sure the states have skin in the game so that they administer the programs properly, because otherwise their incentive is to draw down more federal money to take the burden off state taxpayers. But we're all taxpayers, so somebody's paying. There's no such thing as a free lunch.
Right, and not just no such thing as a free lunch. It encourages state legislators to look the other way because you're just bringing that money into the state. I kind of felt that way about Medicaid, but thanks.
I'm sorry, Glenn, gentlemen, time's expired on that.
Yeah.
Okay. Chair recognizes, who's next? Ms. Simon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a January 6, 2026 article from the New York Times, Health Department to freeze $10 billion in funding to 5 Democratic states.
Without objection to order.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate us having this conversation, and I do apologize to our witnesses. Being in the last briefing took us out of this space, but you coming here to provide us some opportunity to discuss this is important, because I think it is true. We have to recognize that fraud is fraud, and theft is theft. And anybody, and I say anyone, who takes away food out of the mouths of children, who denies child care to women, particularly young women, who are going to school and working and doing everything right, who need a little hand up. I don't know who in here has had to walk their baby to childcare and go to school full time and work full time as a young mom. I know I did. And I know that I received, but 27 years ago, child care stipends. So we can be mad at the criminals in every state, including your state, who took resources from children. But I also want to go back to the unanimous consent that I just talked about. I think we don't have to go too far back, maybe 2 days, to recognize that the President of the United States and the administration is halting billions of dollars now, billions of dollars to child care providers and centers around this country. In fact, I have a story that we just received in my office. We heard today that there needs to be accountability. But what about accountability to a young woman that we talked to today in our office who was told by her child care center, and she is going to school full-time at the local community college, that the President of the United States will be halting all funding, and within 6 weeks, she may not have an opportunity to continue her studies because guess what? There's a party in power that wants to punish the poor, not just in Democratic states, but all over the country. The reducing of SNAP benefits, the shocking taking away of resources from sick children, the halting, and I'll say it again, the stopping of clinical trials for sick babies. What we will do as Democrats is acknowledge that fraud is fraud. What we will not do is allow a conversation to go on to problematize immigrants in this country writ large. Can you imagine a society where we took the wrong of a small few and relegated that wrong to a whole community? Well, that's what we're doing here today, not just in Minnesota, but now accusing thousands and thousands of child care providers all over the country before they get their day in court, proposing that they, in fact, shouldn't be taking care of kids across the country. I think it's shocking. This story that I want to end my quick testimony with, Nancy Harvey, she's a child care provider in Oakland, California, where I represent a beautiful constituency. She's in my congressional district. Nancy has been a long-term child care provider, an advocate for early care and education for our babies, no matter who their parents vote for. Services that we know that are critical for every child, every child. Collective punishment is what the folks across the aisle want to do. We know it's wrong, it's reckless, and the Trump administration, we believe, must immediately reverse course so that families have access to vital federal funds that they are entitled to. Because you have a party that says they want everyone to work in this country. You want everyone to do their fair share. And yet, because we are so angry at a small few folks who, in fact, broke the law, that we want to create a collective punishment for all poor people, working families who are trying to do their best. I don't have any questions because they have been answered. This is a politic of cruelty. This is a politic of anti-family. This is a politic of anti-poverty. And for someone who grew up in poverty, I know how it feels when you wait and wait and wait to just get a chance to do better. And folks who've never met you, talk to you, believe in you or love you, are telling you you are not worth it. That is what this administration is doing to millions of children because of this halting of funding. And I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Chair recognizes Mr. Higgins from Louisiana.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Robbins and Mr. Hudson, Ms. Rarick, you're all members of the Minnesota State Legislature, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And Ms. Robbins, you're the chair of the Fraud Prevention Oversight Committee, is that correct?
Yes.
And Mr. Hudson and Ms. Rarick, you're members of that committee as well, correct?
Yes, sir.
Correct.
All right, so you three collectively, America should clearly understand you have an excellent perspective what's going on inside Minnesota, in specifically regards to the fraud that we are investigating and discussing today. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So we have a particular community, a Somali community in Minnesota that has stunning percentages are participating in government programs where they're drawing a lot of money, big money. This has been discussed and revealed and reported and is factual. You have a tremendous amount of criminal fraud taking place that one of my colleagues, the gentleman from the other side of the aisle, mentioned transparency. I would argue that from a regular American's perspective, it's quite transparent that something criminal is going on when you have billions of dollars disappearing into child care centers with no children in them, and you have a tremendous transfer of wealth into a relatively small immigrant community. You have $9 billion, that's $9,000 million missing in the last few years. It's alleged to be fraudulently stolen. You have they're sending money, the Somali community in Minnesota sending money, big money, overseas. They're contributing money, big money, to Democrat candidates and elected officials. The Democratic political machine in Minnesota has benefited from this criminal network of Somali immigrants who who have systematically stolen billions of dollars of federal charitable money, essentially. The good lady, my colleague, clarified this is money designed for poor folk that need a hand up. And we generally want that to happen in America in an effective manner. So this is the scenario that we are looking into today. Have I summed it up fairly well, Ms. Robbins?
Yes, sir. And I would just like to add.
Before you add, Mr. Hudson, is this an effective summary, sir?
Yes, sir, it is.
Thank you, Ms. Rarick.
Yes.
Thank you. So from the perspective of members of the Fraud Investigative Committee of the Minnesota State Legislature, we have a large criminal network with high percentages of participation in that criminal network from the Somali community in Minnesota. That community has tremendous influence within the political arena, specifically within the Democrat political arena in Minnesota. The Democrat political machine has been covering for this criminal network, and here we go to Governor Walz's involvement here, which is shocking to me, quite frankly, because I've been friendly with Governor Walz for many years. I served with him here. But can you discuss for me the governor's administration's involvement in intimidation and oppression and retaliation against whistleblowers? Ms. Robbins, have you had conversations with whistleblowers who have been treated like that by the Walz administration?
Yes, I have.
And can you tell us about that? Without naming the person or revealing stuff that's secret, tell us how that retaliation would happen.
So it happens in a variety of ways. They are demoted or reassigned, or they are told that they could lose their job and then their house or their pension or their retirement benefits or not qualify for unemployment. So it's...
Well, that's very serious. That's very serious allegation. I would say that's criminal retaliation. Mr. Hudson and Ms. Rarick, have you seen similar?
I would defer to Representative Rarick.
Yes, so Representative Robbins and once in a while Representative Hudson have had multiple conversations with whistleblowers, and that is exactly what they said to us, especially in a face-to-face meeting in St. Paul. That is exactly
Unbelievable.
what they said.
Mr. Chairman, my time has expired, but this leans into the criminal spectrum, sir. I yield.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes Mr. Walkinshaw from Virginia.
I think I was here first.
They told me Walkinshaw.
And then,
I'm happy to
Walkinshaw.
defer.
Yeah.
thank you. And Mr. Min?
I'm just doing what the Democrat staff says. Walkinshaw's next.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me just start with something simple. I think we're all agreed upon today. Fraud is real, fraud is wrong, and fraud should be prosecuted, period. And those who stole the taxpayer dollars in Minnesota or anywhere else should face the full force of the law. But what we're seeing today, and the premise of this hearing, is selective outrage about fraud. Because if my Republican colleagues actually cared about stopping fraud, they would not be defending the one president in modern history who is systematically tearing down the institutions designed to prevent it. The one president in history who has pardoned fraudster after fraudster after fraudster. But Donald Trump didn't just pardon those convicted of fraud. He's gone after the people whose job it is to find fraud. He fired the independent inspector general at the State Department. He fired the independent inspector general of the intelligence community. He removed the acting inspector general at Health and Human Services in the middle of a pandemic as massive emergency funds were going out the door. He pushed out the Defense Department IG. And why has Trump gone after these independent inspectors general? Simple. In each case, they were investigating his or his administration's misconduct and fraud. Donald Trump's approach to fraud is to fire the referees and then say that the game is clean because no one blows the whistle. And he hasn't stopped with IGs. He's repeatedly attacked prosecutors, law enforcement, and career public servants who investigated misconduct that was politically inconvenient for him. He's turned oversight and fraud prevention into a Donald Trump loyalty test. That is not draining the swamp. So forgive me if I find it difficult to take seriously lectures about fraud from people who have cheered while the most corrupt president in modern history has dismantled protection after protection against fraud. You don't get to scream fraud on Tuesday after you fired the fraud investigators on Monday. We can protect taxpayers. We can root out corruption and fraud, but we can't do it by turning fraud into a political weapon and ignoring the record of the person who did more than anyone to weaken accountability. Representative Robbins, in Minnesota, the governor doesn't have authority to pardon independently. There's a board, I think, and the governor is a member of that board with the attorney general and some others. But if that board in Minnesota were to pardon individuals convicted of fraud, clearly convicted of fraud, do you think a pardon like that would damage your efforts to root out corruption and fraud in Minnesota?
It would really depend on the specifics of the facts of the case and the law, and
You're not
I'm
willing
not
to
going to
say
comment
that,
on a hypothetical.
You're not going to say that pardoning fraudsters would make it harder to prevent fraud in Minnesota. You're not willing to say that today.
I want to root out fraud and corruption and make sure
Okay,
people
all
are
right.
prosecuted.
You're not willing to say that. You're comfortable with fraudsters being pardoned. You don't think it would damage the work.
I want everyone who's committed a crime to be prosecuted and held accountable.
And pardoned?
It would depend on the case. I don't participate in the pardon process in Minnesota, but every case is very unique, and every governor and attorney general should look
Okay,
at the
Mr.
specifics.
Ballou, can you just talk us through, I know this has come up already, the firing of independent inspectors general, the intimidation of them, making it harder to do their jobs. How does that impact fraud prevention and the prosecution of fraud from the perspective of a former prosecutor?
One of the best investments that the government can make is in its inspectors general. Last year, IGs identified an estimated $50 billion in savings, either through duplicative programs or for specifically criminal fraud. The challenge that we have is with 19 IGs being fired, that work literally is not happening, and there's evidence to suggest that at least some of them have been fired specifically because they were going after enemies or allies of this administration.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a CNN article from February 11, 2025, USAID IG fired day after report critical of impacts of Trump administration.
Without objection, so ordered. Chair now recognizes Mr. Burchett from Tennessee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that it needs to be said that Governor Walz needs to step down. Him saying he will stay on to investigate is like O.J. Simpson saying he will investigate the murder of his ex-wife. Just doesn't work out. I have a question to the representatives, and thank y'all for being here. It's a tough gig. I did that for many years. Do you think that the Walz administration suppressed fraud and abuse in social service programs because they're afraid of exposing Somali residents? Just go down the line here. Yes, ma'am.
So not only do we think that's what happened, Mr. Burchett, but it is also what a Somali American investigator associated with the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension said. He said in an article, fraudsters also have sought to exploit the burgeoning political power of the Somali community and the feckless fear that establishment politicians and state agencies show when confronted with charges of racism and Islamophobia. This is from a Somali federal prosecutor or investigator.
Sir?
Indeed, it's not just a theory. We have the record of the recording of Keith Ellison meeting with defendants and defeating our future case, where it was very explicit that the motivation for keeping scrutiny off them was based on perceived racism.
Ma'am?
From the mouth of a whistleblower. You appear to be so this is what a whistleblower was told. You appear to be holding back these contracts because they are going to a diverse community. It's not a good look.
Okay. Do you think Somalians should be tied to these crimes should be deported, ma'am?
If they're not here legally, yes. If they are citizens, they should go through the criminal justice process. And then there might be other categories, but I would have to better understand.
I agree. So some of these, I mean, some of these folks are born here and then or naturalized, so they would have the constitutional protection thereof. So yes, ma'am. Sir?
If there is any legal pathway to do so, absolutely.
Ma'am?
So you've got quite a big bucket of people, right? You've got people that were born here, that's a different situation. You have a people that were naturalized, and then those are here illegally. So you have to treat each one completely separately with different paths.
Ma'am, who is helping these folks navigate this complex grant application process? It seems to me that it's orchestrated. Surely they've got to go to. We've always found that out in my dealings with state government. There was always somebody in there, a gatekeeper.
Yes, and my colleague, Representative Hudson, could speak to it. There is a sort of a cottage industry of Somali consultants who help this.
I bet there is. Yes, sir.
Yeah, as I stated in my opening statement, I've personally talked to two gentlemen who have worked as consultants for multiple entities receiving government benefits. And they don't believe they're doing anything wrong, and by the letter of the law, they might be legally acting, but they have created an industry out of benefits that were intended to lift people up, not become a business.
Add to that, ma'am?
So that is something that we have heard repeatedly from whistleblowers and others, that there is, yes, I would call it a cottage industry of people that when you land on our soil, that they are going to teach you all the different ways to sign up for multiple social service programs. And there's also that. So they sign up for the max amount, which is probably why there's a report that just came out on December 13th of last year that says that 81% of Somalis were receiving some sort of welfare in Minnesota.
If you don't know the answer to this, just tell me. Do you have any knowledge or heard any talk that the Somalis are directing any of these funds to American U.S. tax dollars to Al-Shabaab, terrorist organization?
There have been past criminal convictions in this, and currently we believe it's mostly happening indirectly as they send money to Somalia that Al-Shabaab takes a cut.
Y'all agree with that? We good with that? Do you think the design of the social service programs incentivizes fraud and abuse?
Absolutely. There's no doubt about it. When you are willing to hand over a sack of money to somebody on the assumption that they're going to provide a benevolent service and then you never check to see if they actually did, obviously you're going to invite fraud, waste, and abuse.
Ma'am?
Yeah, absolutely. We just stood up a new program that we'll probably talk about in a little bit, which is the Paid Family Leave Program. It was literally designed by Democrats to have waste, fraud, and abuse on a grand scale.
Okay, I'm going to be out of time. Mr. Chairman, thank you. But I think America, we're sick of the hearings. We're sick of all this. We need justice. We need convictions if these folks are guilty, and that needs to happen. America is sick of this, and it needs to happen. Thank you all so much, and thank you for your bravery.
Very well said. Chair recognizes Mr. Subramanian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm so glad that committee Republicans finally want to talk about fraud and corruption and misuse of federal funds. This majority, though, has conveniently avoided this topic, but let's talk about the fraud in this administration. And let's start with President Trump accepting a $400 million plane as a gift from Qatar, which the president announced he would transfer afterwards to his presidential library, basically to himself. And then the president announced a $1 trillion economic agreement with Qatar and a security guarantee for them as well, an unprecedented one. Next, Trump has also accepted hundreds of millions of dollars in undisclosed amounts for his ballroom project, including from companies who had civil and potentially criminal charges that were then dropped against them by this administration. And it's not just President Trump. Secretary Kristi Noem has paid more than $200 million in DHS ad contracts last fall and bypassed the normal competitive bidding process to award some of the funds to a firm with deep ties to herself. And then Secretary Noem also spent $170 million of taxpayer dollars on new jets, including one for her own private travel. Family members of the president have entered into $2 billion in business deals with the UAE government and their government officials, while the U.S. Conveniently then signed a major CHIPS agreement with the UAE. And then after his election, President Trump put $4 billion in shares of his media company in a trust to be run by his son. And then President Trump maintained ownership of his business empire while letting his family run the day-to-day. And then in September, Forbes estimated that President Trump's meme coin tokens were worth $709 million, and his World Liberty financial tokens were worth more than $338 million, but we don't know exactly how that happened. Then President Trump also stopped the enforcement of foreign and bribery and fraud so that we could have American companies commit fraud abroad as well and not get prosecuted. President Trump also has made hundreds of visits to his own properties using taxpayer dollars, a lot of golfing included, and used his presidency for personal profit to those properties. In 2019, the GAO reported a trip to Mar-a-Lago cost over $3 million, and so if you add that up, that's a lot of taxpayer money being misused and a lot of fraud. The interim U.S. attorney for D.C. ended prosecution of a January 6th defendant after he represented that defendant in private practice. President Trump pardoned fraudster Trevor Milton, a former CEO convicted of fraud in 2022, who, with the stroke of Trump's pen, escaped paying the $600 million in restitution that prosecutors argued he should pay to people who've invested in his company. According to the Washington Post, at least 20 people who have received clemency from Trump were given forgiveness for financial penalties totaling tens of millions of dollars. And then President Trump pardoned Binance founder Changpeng Zhao, a money launderer, after getting support for a family crypto venture. And then President Trump also pardoned CEO Andrew Weidenhorn for stealing $47 million of his own money from his own company, but had his case dropped after he donated to the president. And then President Trump also pardoned the founder of the electric vehicle company Nikola, who was convicted of fraud and donated $1.8 million to political committees supporting President Trump. And then prior to his confirmation, Secretary Hegset's wife owned thousands of dollars in defense stocks, including companies that contract with the DoD. And DoD Secretary Hegseth brought his wife, who has defense company investments, to meetings with foreign defense officials at a NATO gathering where Ukraine policy was discussed. And from recently passed funding legislation, U.S. senators can claim over $500,000 in taxpayer dollars over phone record collections during the January 6th investigation. We just commemorated the 5th anniversary of January 6th. And then border czar Tom Homan dodged FBI background checks and accepted $50,000 from undercover agents acting as business people in exchange for government contracts. The DOJ investigation of that was shut down by this administration. President Trump wrote on his social media platform, Truth Social, "This is a great time to buy DJT," less than 4 hours before lifting the tariffs he imposed days earlier, raising accusations of improprieties well-founded. President Trump's FBI director has reportedly used taxpayer dollars to escort his girlfriend's friend home from partying in Nashville. RFK Jr., the secretary, refused to fully cut ties to a vaccine lawsuit against a pharmaceutical company while serving as secretary, arrangement that profits from the suit would go to his son. Saudi-funded golf tournaments moved events to Trump golf courses, providing a financial windfall for President Trump and his family as his administration sets Middle East policy. FBI Director Kash Patel refused to divest from stock holdings in a company that controls a Chinese fast fashion firm accused of using forced labor and child labor, raising questions about the extent to which he'd enforce human trafficking laws. President Trump's God Bless the American Bible, which was a $3 production cost and $60 tag per copy, are printed in China. The Bible, however, is exempted from Trump's tariffs on China due to an exemption for religious materials. And I could keep going. Tom Krause, the CEO of Cloud Software, was hired to work on a payment system at the Treasury Department, raising questions about competitive advantages for future contracts. A Cloud Software subsidiary previously donated $1 million to Trump's inaugural fund. And the first directive issued by the U.S. Department of Energy Secretary Chris Wright focused on advancing geothermal energy, which benefits Fervo, in which his former company Liberty Energy had invested $10 million in. Commerce Secretary Lutnick.
Gentleman's time's expired, 40 seconds over, and I've been cutting members off.
I have more.
You have what?
I have more, but I'll yield back.
Okay. Chair recognizes, and you can submit anything you want to the record. We'll put in there. Chair recognizes
Mr.
Ms.
Chair.
Boebert from Colorado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. Representative Robbins, did your Fraud Prevention Committee raise formal concerns about suspected child care fraud to DHS or state leadership before federal indictments were issued?
So the original federal indictments came before I was elected back in 2015 or so, and then we thought DHS had cleaned it up, and they did not. So we did a hearing last February of 2025, and we provided them a list of child care facilities we thought they should check out. My understanding is they have not, and so we're hoping that they will take this seriously and go investigate with on-site visits what's going on in these child care facilities.
And when you raised awareness, were the governor, Governor Tim Walz, and the Attorney General made aware of these warnings?
Oh, I'm sure.
Did the state leadership fail to act promptly? I mean, it kind of sounds like they did if you still haven't received any information regarding these warnings.
Yes, we don't know that they took any action with the list we gave them.
And Representative Robbins, what recommendations from your committee were given and ignored?
So in general, we always try to look at internal controls, and we've asked, I mean, it's not complicated. We want them to go make sure recipients are eligible, that providers are eligible, that services are actually being provided. Our staff has gone to many of these places, and so it's not just the Nick Shirley video. Our staff has gone and looked at this, and there are literally no one there during business hours. Some of the offices where we have the address are empty. Like, there's no furniture. So they are not doing their job.
Thank you. Mr. Ballou, does the Department of Justice have more resources to uncover fraud than a 20-year-old YouTuber?
Yes, but those resources are declining.
Are they still more than a 20-year-old YouTuber with a cell phone camera?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, the primary office that would be responsible for prosecuting public corruption, which is what is being alleged today, has essentially been decimated. Most of the attorneys have been fired or left.
Was it decimated when you were there? Was there funding there then?
Yeah, so
Yeah, it was there then. So why did the Department of Justice under the Biden administration ignore repeated attempts to uncover this massive fraudulent misuse of taxpayer dollars?
As you may recall, the indictment actually happened during the Biden administration.
And what action has been taken in the state to ensure that this isn't happening? Because we just saw dozens and dozens of centers that are receiving hundreds of millions of dollars collectively that are not functionally operational.
Yeah, well, in 2022, under the Biden administration, over 70 people were indicted for exactly this scheme.
So, Mr. Ballou, yes or no? A Medicaid program with low barriers to entry and minimal reimbursement requirements, that's something that would be highly vulnerable to fraud if oversight is weak, correct?
Exactly, and the challenge is that that oversight
Thank you.
is being
Yes or no?
cut further because
Thank you for your
the
answer.
tax-
Mr. Ballou, yes or no? When a program projected at $2.6 million explodes to over $100 million annually, that's a glaring red flag.
The problem that we have is that all the oversight at the federal level
Yes or
for
no?
this
Is that a
being
red flag
cut.
when a
The challenge-
$2.6 million program
The challenge that we
explodes to
have
over $100 million? Yes
is
or
the
no?
offices that
Yes
are
or no, sir?
responsible for identifying those red flags are being defunded.
Mr. Ballou, yes or no? When the same individuals or networks bill multiple Medicaid programs, that indicates organized fraud.
And the challenge that we have is
Yes
that
or
the
no? Does that
folks
indicate
handle-
fraud when you're getting the same individuals and networks that are billing multiple Medicaid programs?
Precisely the offices that would identify that are being defunded.
As they should be. Mr. Ballou, yes or no? Did the Biden administration cover this up for political reasons? Because uncovering fraud on this massive scale would have hurt the 2024 Democrat vice presidential candidate.
Just so I understand, are you saying that the offices that uncover fraud should be defunded?
I'm saying that these programs and the fraud that is taking place should be defunded.
My understanding is what you were just saying is that the fraud programs need
So
to be
no,
defunded.
we need to uncover these, but
And the challenge
these
that we
actual
have
programs
is that those
that are
offices
ballooning to
being
$100 million, and if you could get back to the question I just asked, was this covered up because you thought it would hurt the 2024 Democrat vice presidential candidate?
The office that
Governor
would
Tim Walz.
investigate that kind
Yes or
of
no?
alleged public
Yes or
integrity
no?
fraud has been defunded.
In 2024, it was not defunded. And was this covered up to protect a vice presidential candidate? Yes or no, Mr.
And
Ballou?
prior to 2024, over 70 indictments were brought under the Biden
Mr. Ballou, was
administration.
this covered up to protect a political candidate?
Once again, that office has been defunded, and there are
Thank you,
over
Mr.
70
Blue.
indictments brought
I'm sorry
under
that
the
you're
Biden
not answering
administration.
questions before this committee correctly. Thank you.
And who's next? Okay. Thank you. Chair now recognizes Ms. Tlaib from Michigan.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all so much for being here. I think as someone who served in the State House, I know how important it is, no matter if there's a D or R next to, any name of anybody that's in charge, to make sure we root out any sort of fraud, scams, because we know it hurts everyone. But as a Muslim American, I got to ask you all, as a public servant, because, Representative Robbins, Hudson, Rarick, do you believe every Somali in Minnesota is engaged in fraud right now? Yes or no? You can start.
No.
No.
Absolutely not.
Do you believe that Muslims are demons?
No.
No.
Absolutely not. That's a ridiculous thing to even say. I hope nobody says that.
Yeah. Well, I just think it's really important, as you all do the job that you need to do, to also root out hate and divisive language that put, you can't imagine a child listening to that. You know what I mean? And they're seeing that. And I'm telling you, as somebody that grew up Muslim in America, sometimes you're just listening to that and you feel othered. You feel like you're less than, that maybe the things that are being said are true. And so, Mr. Chair, I have to submit for the record, I know this is not your only source, I heard you, but, unnamed source in a viral Minnesota Somali fraud video is a right-wing lobbyist who called Muslim demons. But why this is more disturbing, and I don't know if any of you shared it, but I want you to know that who shared it, despite this, and all the falsehoods that my colleagues have already highlighted in a very, very shameful way, that this video has been shared widely and proudly by Attorney General Pam Bondi, by FBI Director Kash Patel, by Vice President J.D. Vance, who actually called the video, quote, far more useful journalism than any of our winners of the 2024 Pulitzer Prizes. The video creators, Nick Shirley, has built this career, right? But on a lot of Islamophobia and dehumanization, that I just feel as public servant, as you root out fraud, and you have to, that you don't make it out that it's about the Somali community. It's about maybe not having the checks and balances, and maybe, again, wanting to do that. But I urge you all, because this is the same person that also talked about the community I represent in the city of Dearborn. And again, there are children watching, and I say this, that racist rhetoric, no matter faith or ethnicity, against any of our neighbors is not going to prevent fraud. Doing this will not prevent fraud. We already saw Trump administration using this story to pretext of sending 2,000 federal agents to target and harass Somali American community. I mean, do you agree with that? Sending troops in.
I don't think ICE agents are troops, and ICE agents should be able to do their job anywhere
I'm so sorry,
in America.
I meant federal agents. You're right, I meant federal agents, ma'am. Do you believe federal agents should come in, and 2,000 federal agents should come into your state?
I think ICE agents should be doing their job anywhere in America. It's their jurisdiction, and if there are
But that's the
criminals,
response of the president. So if you're,
if there are criminals who need to be
Yes, I understand.
deported, they should be deported.
but that's not what's going to happen. Representative Hudson?
I absolutely welcome immigration enforcement in the state of
Yeah,
Minnesota.
but do you think it's really immigration enforcement? Because they're racially profiling. They're going to just stop people that look Somali or look Muslim or ethnic and just harass them. And I'm telling you, as somebody that for the first time ever, my mother in 50 years being here, and the sweetest woman, she'd feed anybody. She doesn't care if you're Republican, Democrat. She would make sure you're not hungry and fed. And she's carrying a passport for the first time in her life here, because she knows because she wears a hijab, she might be stopped by an ICE agent. Is that the kind of militarization? I know you won't get stopped, but somebody like my mother and somebody like your Somali American neighbors in Minnesota will be stopped. in a way that is dehumanizing. They do it in front of kids. They don't care. And I'm saying this to you and asking all of you, do your job, but don't allow your job and what you're doing to be utilized as a racist trope that all Somali Americans are criminals, that Muslims are demons. It's incredibly dangerous. And so, Representative Robbins, Hudson Yark, one of the things that the collective punishment, right? I mean, the fact that now I'm seeing the Trump administration say, okay, we're going to cut child care and social services to California, Illinois, New York, Minnesota, Colorado. Like, is that really the answer? Is that going to prevent fraud? Do you believe cutting 23,000 kids from child care, do you think that's going to prevent fraud?
So my understanding, it's not being cut. If they can document that the actual children are there and that they have attendance records, they will get the funding. So this is a misnomer saying it's all going to be cut. It's
Okay.
not true.
We'll see. Representative Hudson?
I tend not to blame firemen for water damage when they put out a fire.
Okay.
And that's what's going on.
So you're good with them cut. Okay. How about you?
I believe in the due process of law. And so back to your comment about your dear mother, because she wears a hijab and she has to carry her passport. So I think that every person has value. Everyone is a child of God, right? And we may have a different name, but here's the thing, is that they all deserve respect.
Absolutely.
They all deserve kindness. They all deserve the process of law
Absolutely.
and due process.
And I'll tell
so
you,
that
I
is what
think-
we believe in.
And I see it among my community. It's a very diverse community. We're calling people on other, folks that are, no matter what their background is, because we don't want any criminal activity or fraud because we know it hurts everybody. But I'm asking all of you, as you do this, your job, call out against the racist comments. Protect everyone in Minnesota, no matter their faith or ethnicity. So be careful in sharing these videos. I'm sorry, Chairman, this is important. Be careful as you do your job, not to allow people that you all are trying to root out fraud to be used as a ploy to go after Muslims and
And
Somali
ladies,
Americans.
time's expired. Thank you. Chair, before I recognize Mr. Cloud, Mr. Gill has a unanimous consent request.
Sure, yep, this is from the Minnesota Reformer, Somali American former investigator, why you're hearing about fraud in my community.
Without objection, so ordered. Chair now, do you have another one? Okay, Chair recognizes Mr. Cloud from Texas for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman, and I appreciate you holding this hearing. It's important, as you have mentioned at the outset, that we continue our work to